Good evening, fellow authors, and more importantly, readers. A few months ago, quite a few months ago now, I came in here and I gave you a little bit of a lecture about how to write and publish a book. Didn't get into a lot of depth, obviously, in the 8 minutes I had, but I tried. Excuse me. Now, how many here remember what this is? Okay. How many actually had to use it in their line of work? I did. Had about 6 or 7 of these slide rules. Now, an interesting story about slide rules is that back in the day, most of the last century, in fact, if you wanted to do any serious computations, put somebody on the moon, for example, this was the tool you used. We didn't have supercomputers. We didn't have all of that technology. Wonderful tool. Most of them, this one isn't, but most of them were made by Pickett Corporation. Pickett slide rules were the slide rule to have. Had all kinds of prices, the cheap ones the college students were using, scientific ones that the engineers were using. Ran, I think, from like $10 to $100. Pickett owned this business. 1972, HP comes along, and they invent the pocket calculator. The original one was the HP 35, this one was the HP 15C, came along a little later. Pickett took the attitude that, yeah, they're nice, and they add and they subtract, and they do a few wonderful mathematical things, but if you need to do serious logarithmic work, you needed to have a slide rule. 5 years later, Pickett was closing its doors. They ignored the technology change that was occurring. How many here remember 45 RPM records? Okay. Here's another technology change that occurred right under the noses of an industry. They didn't see it coming. 78 RPM records were all the rage in the 40s and 50s and so on. And then they figured out a way to get a lot more information on a record by making it go slower. And the 33s came along. And that was nice. You could get 10, 15 songs on a 33 and a half. But they were missing the young people market. They wanted to be able to just put onesie, twosie songs out there. So along came the 45. The 45 was great because you could sell a song, a single song, and usually on the backside they'd have some secondary song by that same artist. What happened on several occasions is that the secondary song became the more popular song because the industry gurus guessed wrong. Interesting, and this takes us into books in a second. How about 8-track cassettes? Anybody remember those? Yeah, they came and left rather quickly. How about DOS computers?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, oh, the pain, the misery. My point here in all of this is that technology changes. Sometimes the industry doesn't get it right. Sometimes they do. Now, go back about almost 600 years, 1498. Go back to when the monks were sitting there writing books, longhand, very artistic, scribbling in the columns. The monks had these impressive books, mostly Bibles, but they wrote other things. And these books were cherished. I mean, they had to keep them in safes practically because, it took a lot of work to write one. Gutenberg comes along, about 1498 or so. He comes up with a way to make a press, and make books. Oh, gee, you could spit them out like crazy. There was a resistance to these books, actually, these mass-produced books, because they didn't smell the same as the ones that hung around in a cellar for a long time. They didn't feel the same. They didn't have that artistic value. A lot of resistance to it. But 5, 10, 15, I think it was 20 years later, almost every book being produced by that point was being printed. Why? The technology changed. Excuse me. David House of Intel quotes Moore's Law all the time. Moore's Law says the technology capabilities will double about every 2 years. And that's actually right. David House is misquotes it quite often. He says about every 18 months. Maybe he's right. He was president or CEO of Intel. Now, I have author friends. In fact, a number of you folks are writers, and that's why I wanted to come here and talk about this tonight. I have a number of author friends that have the vision of writing the way it used to be. The way it used to be was 2 years ago. This is how we're talking in author circles on blogs these days. The old days were 2 years ago. Because 2, 3, 5, 10, 50 years ago, you went out, you wrote your book, or you got an advance if you were well known. You wrote your book, and then you got an agent, which was a real struggle. And then you got a publisher, usually through the agent, and then quite often the author ended up footing the bill to go print maybe 10,000 books. And then eventually the author retired to the California hills, and everything was wonderful, and lived happily ever after. However, today's model is very different. Today, what most authors are doing is writing the book, publishing it, and I get and I'll be honest with you, I get my copies of my books, if I buy them, for $4.85 a piece. And I can order one, I can order 10,000, whatever I want. List price on Amazon, $17.95. Amazon and the company that prints these, which is owned by Amazon, CreateSpace, works out a deal with the author where they do all the work. They print it. They do the credit card. They do returns. They do whatever it is. They just deposit money in my account once a month. That's all I have to do after I've got the book out there. And I think it's $5.85 a piece. Stephen King, for his books, he's one of the higher paid ones, on a book that would sell for about $20, he gets about 70 cents, if he's lucky. Most well-known authors don't get much if they go through the traditional publishing route. However, if they're very successful in the New York Times list and all that, they make a fair amount of money. But this is like being a famous sports celebrity. I mean, there's a small number of them, but most authors are not doing that well. So today what you do is you write your book, you get it into print, because print is really cheap to get it into these days. I go with CreateSpace. For almost $5 I get a copy of the book. But more importantly is today, this is a book. This is a Kindle. This is the black and white Kindle, rugged, holds maybe as many as 10,000 books. It's a wonderful way to read. I resisted this. I didn't have my book on Kindle until about a year ago. It doesn't smell like a book. The months right in the column. I couldn't do any of that stuff. I have fallen in love with this thing, especially when you're reading in bed. Just hit the button. You don't have to sit there and catch the pages in the sheets and all that. Wonderful, wonderful tool. This is also the Kindle. This is a Kindle Fire. And tonight's lecture is on there. Same story, I can read in this, but I can also watch movies and stuff for a living. You have a handout on the table. If you don't panic. And it's got Kindle publishing, Smashboard publishing, and some of the things I'll be talking about right now they're all listed on here. And you can see all these web links, but don't bother with trying to type all these links in. I put this page on the web, and up at the top on the first line there, you can see the link to this page. So just go there and click on the links rather than type them all in. Excuse me. I got an email yesterday, and I was so inspired because the quote in it, I have to read it to you in its entirety. It's from Seth Godin. Seth Godin is an extremely popular writer who's gone independent. He used to go through traditional publishers and all, and it dawned on him that he can make $5, $6 a copy on his book instead of 30 cents he was making. He wrote this, and this is great. understand the power of digital. This is the quote. Try to imagine something like this happening 10 years ago in the publishing world today. That's eons. An 11-year-old kid wakes up on a Saturday morning, gets his allowance, then standing in his pajamas, buys a Bon Jovi song for 99 cents. Okay. Compare this to the hassle 10 years ago of getting a ride, driving to the mall, finding the album in question, finding the $14 to pay for the album, and then driving home with it. The whole business model in the music industry has changed. Nobody's going out there. The CD stores are closing. Nobody's doing that anymore. You buy the music online. I'm even guilty of that. The same thing is happening with books today. Books are, this is a book, and I guarantee you within 20 years, paper books will be a thing of the past, and with a few exceptions, people will think of this as a book. This is a book. Nothing wrong with that. We have to go with the technology. So you take your, and one other thing that Seth didn't mention in there, but I think he forgets to point out that it's very easy for 10 kids to buy a $1 piece of music. It's much more difficult for 10 kids to find $14. The 45 RPM record back then solved that problem. They had these huge albums that cost $15. The kids could go out and for 90 cents or whatever it was, they could get a 45 RPM record. This is happening with books now. Book pricing is a big debate in the indie writing world. How much should they charge? Obviously, this book is expensive because of the paper and the ink and the shipping and all that. And this is $17.95. My Kindle version of this book sells for $4.99, which is a high-priced Kindle book. The majority of the unknown authors these days are getting 99 cents to $2.99. That seems to be the price for most books. I'm working on another book, and when that one comes out, I'll probably drop this one to $2.99 as well. Now, you might be wondering, what does numbers look like? I'll be honest about it. I'm doubling every year since the book came out, and I think this year I'm looking at about $20,000 in sales, which is, for an unheard of author, is fabulous. I can't believe this is happening. So that's great, and that's total books. Books, when I say books today, I talk about Kindle, print, whatever. The print version versus the Kindle. The Kindle, some months I have as many as 32 Kindles to 1 print ratio. So if you're thinking about getting a book out there today, definitely get it into print. There's some number of market for that. But you must think in terms of electronic books today. The print one, it's a thing of the past. And I belong to some authors groups, and there's a couple of people in there that, I'm working on getting an agent, and they're dying. And even if they get the agent, New York Times list books right now are just, they're really in trouble. All these there's 6 big publishing houses, Random House and Simon & Schuster and all. They're laying off people, they're getting rid of staff. Why? Because the print book is disappearing, and they're still stuck in that mentality, well, we can't put the book onto the Kindles and stuff for a low price because it'll hurt our print sales. Yet they're not selling the print books either. So it's just, they're caught up in the old thinking of the industry. They're going to go the way of picking. That's what's happening. 3 of them are in serious trouble. How do I market my book, which is really what I came here to tell you about? I'm a nobody. Nobody knows who I am. However, I went off on that hike in the Appalachian Trail, which is what my book is about. I gave away a whole bunch of business cards on the hike, not thinking I was going to do a book, but it was sheer genius, because so many of those people wrote to me. I had an email list, I've got a hiking book. Let's see, mail to this list. Right away, the sales were off and running. It was fabulous. The next thing I did is I get into blogging. If you're going to do a book today, get into blogging. So many people in our age group resist blogging. It sounds scary. It's not. It's like sending an email. You fill in a box, you hit click submit, and it puts it up there for the world to see. So be careful what you say. But the reality is, blogging is a great way. Blog on your own blog. Go to the other authors and blog on their blog. Make comments about their books. Become part of that community. And you'll be amazed at the amount of readers you'll get. Another thing I've done, and it's on here, about book trailers down near the bottom. Book trailers. I abhor book trailers, it says right in the beginning. I do. Book trailers are like movie trailers. It's a little movie about the book. You do 1 to 3, maybe 5 minutes. I refused to do it because if you look at them, they're like condom ads from TV. The wheat blowing in the wind, some music going by. You don't know where it's going. So I did a video about how to make fire rubbing sticks on YouTube. Well, I actually learned that talent before I went on the hike, figuring if I got in a really bad situation where I lost my pack, a bear got us, I could at least make a fire. Use a shoelace, whatever. And right at the end of the video, I just pop up with the book and I say, you know, if you really enjoyed this and you want to know more about my hike, here's a book you can look at. That's all I did. It was very innocent. The YouTube video has now had almost 42,000 views. Like, boy, there's a lot of firebugs out there. But it's selling books. I know it's selling books. I can't track the data, but I know it is. I recently did a video, and I encourage you all, Jane's video, it's on there, go take a look at it. It's not a book trailer. It's a tribute to the women we met walking across Spain. And it's a beautiful piece, I think, it's a beautiful piece of representation of the women that we met out there. Some nice music, and right at the end, there's just a little note that says, Jane's got a book coming out this spring. That's all it says. That to me is the way a book trailer should be. Yeah, if you want to read it, here's some information, but here's what we'd really like to tell you about. Every one of you can do a book trailer. I do them right on my PC at home. I mean, the technology is so easy. And talk to Ralph. He's an expert in that stuff. Another thing you might want to do, like not might want, must do, get into Twitter. Twitter sells books. Why people that would like to read a 140-character message would want to go read a 350-page book is beyond me. But Twitter is fabulous for finding people to read your book. It's amazing. So publishing, that's what I do to market my book. That's my secret. It is a secret. Publishing is changing rapidly. Authors now write about the good old days of 2 years ago. And I'm serious. That's what they're doing. I can't predict where it's all heading. At some point, I see companies wanting to grab more of that profit. I get 60-70% of a Kindle sale. I can see it eventually. The companies say, you know, if we cut it to 40, we can make more. The authors will be fighting them, and I'll be leading the way on that fight. I have one last piece of advice. There's never been a better time to be an author. In all of history, right now is the best time to write a book and get it out there. I don't have a yacht out in Sarasota Bay, but I'm doing well with a book that I never thought anybody would want to read. And you can do that too. So, get your book out, and get your book out now. Don't wait.